For our regular session of February 28, 2017. First order of business that we have on the agenda this evening is the opening prayer and the pledges of allegiance to the flags of the United States and the state of Texas. And Councilmember Thompson will lead us in the opening prayer and the pledges. Mr. Thompson?
Will you all stand, please? Father, as we come before you tonight, we recognize that you are the source of everything that we have. Our thoughts, our physical being, our spiritual being, even the very conscience and soul you have placed within these bodies. We live in a land that is divided, and unfortunately politics has become a great divider in our land. And we just pray that each of us here tonight will be mindful of the fact that while we have been elected to an office, while we have been chosen to serve a city as employees and as staff, while we choose to live in this city as residents, help us all to be mindful of the unity that you would desire, so that this great city that you have given us can become an even better place to live in. We thank you for each person present, for giving their time, their talent, and just their concern for this city. And we ask that it is with your blessing that we will conduct this meeting tonight for your glory. In your Son's name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Under the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. And the next thing we have on the agenda this evening, we have a presentation this evening. It's a presentation and briefing regarding the Historical Preservation Committee and its annual report. Mr. Schertz, and I believe it's yours, sir. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You guys may not have seen one of these before. Let me pass that down as he goes through.
Ms. Kaiser, gentlemen of the council, mayor, and Mr. Kessel, thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. I am your representative on the Schertz Historical Preservation Committee, and if you'll beg my endurance for just a couple of minutes, I'd like to bring the new members of council up to date as to what they're looking at on the screen. The City Council back in 2009 produced a vision statement that established certain goals for our city. One of the major goals in 2009 was the development of cultural amenities that would help produce a, quote, a brand for our community. The committee looked at that vision and decided that maybe we could do something to contribute to it. So on June 11th, 2013, we brought to this council a proposal for a coat of arms. And that's what you're seeing on the screen is the city's coat of arms to be used in ceremonial occasions when deemed appropriate. We use it constantly in our committee's correspondence and other activities. Each element of this coat of arms presents historically accurate and appreciably significant elements of the Schertz history from the 19th and 20th century. The crest itself contains 4 representations. Upper right quadrant has the image of the Lone Star of Texas with surrounding embellishment. The lower right quadrant has the image of the bison, the buffalo, that represents the animal's presence on the grassland prairies of south central Texas along Cibolo Valley in the 17th through 19th century. The lower left quadrant represents the sailing ships that transported the European immigrants and our founding settlers here in Texas from the Texas shores onward to our community. The upper left quadrant depicts the wagon wheel, which was the key element in the settlers' land transport to our area and to the farmer professionals that produced after the arrival in Schertz. The supporters on the left and the right of the crest represent the emergence of the agricultural farming aspect of our history and the arrival of Randolph Air Force Base as its pilot training mission as it affected the Schertz area. And the top support depicts the early locomotive, which represents the important technological advances that came with the arrival of train transportation through Schertz in 1876 and 1877. So, with that, let me move on now to the annual report. Annually, we, the committee, publish its annual report to the council containing this group's efforts in pursuing its previous year's goals. We also identify issues that impact our committee and objectives that will guide us in our efforts in the year ahead. Last year, our committee focused on three particular areas. First was historic recognition, second was historic publications, and third was joint community, student, and community initiatives. The committee has met all of its goals for the previous year with regard to these elements. First, historic recognition initiatives included researching, nominating, and assuring the designation of the property at 603 Main Street as a landmark property for our city. And with the assistance of Public Affairs, the Purchasing Department, and Parks and Recreation, we assured that there was a creation and procurement and placement of a Heritage Neighborhood banner throughout the Aviation Heights area. Historic publication projects included publication of 3 remembrance newsletters. We publish them quarterly. The 6 remembrance special edition report articles, and monthly looking back articles in the Schertz magazine. We also had members of our committee who submitted and had published in the Schertz magazine special historical articles during the year. With regards to joint committee and community initiatives, they included joint participation with the Schertz Universal Cibolo School District in the conduct of student history art and essay contests. The committee also conducted a student local historic tour with the Clemens High School History Club. And these school district involvements led to the committee being named the school district's Community Partner of the Year for 2016. We conducted a mid-year local historical symposium in which the community was invited. The committee assisted with the 2016 Community Cleanup Restoration Project. We participated with booths at the city-sponsored Jazz Fest and the 2016 Volunteer Open House event. We've assisted in screening and approving applicants for the city's Main Street Matching Grant Project. And individual accomplishments in these areas led to one of our members, Jim Webb, being selected as the Schertz Community Distinguished Volunteer of the Year. This calendar year, the committee has set goals inclusive of each of these project areas previously discussed. One particular goal requires close attention by both city staff, city council, to see its fulfillment. Allow me to provide a bit of history on this particular goal that we're interested in pursuing. For nearly 2 decades, the issue of vitalization of cultural city activities here in Schertz has been before city leadership. The issue was visited on August 21st, 2000 City Council meeting by City Councilman Timothy Sweeney. Mr. Sweeney asked the question as to what might be done to revitalize Highway 78 and Main Street. Mr. Marquez, representing City Economic Development Department at the time, replied that his urban design team was looking at some possibilities that would promote tourism and what he referred to as a, quote, streetfold kind of situation on Main Street. Nothing further is known to have occurred with respect to a Main Street urban design proposal. Mr. Sweeney again addressed the issue at a joint City Council P&Z meeting held on October 10, 2001, by stating that, quote, FM 78 and Main Street have been neglected for far too long and something needs to be done, close quotes. To which Dewey Caswell, then the city manager, replied that there was an urban design team looking at the key elements of the community and exactly how we could tie together and capture some of the old history, close quotes. Again, nothing further is known to have occurred with respect to 78 and Main Street design plans. In 2009, in furtherance of the revitalization goal of the city of Schertz, entered into a contract with the Austin-based consulting firm TB&G Partners, who produced a January 2010 comprehensive plan proposal for revitalizing downtown. Quoting the authors of that plan, quote, as Schertz continues to grow, it is an opportune time to revitalize the city's historic center to identify certain things, quality of life, build tax revenue, and promote community pride, close quotes. The plan proposed, amongst other things, creation of a historic district within central downtown Main Street. The plan required funding, and general obligation funds were the vehicle chosen to cover the costs. On November 2nd, 2010, general obligation bonds 1 through 4 were passed by the citizens of Schertz, allocating a total of approximately $16 million for quality of life improvements. These include, of course, the soccer fields, the ball fields, the aqua swimming facility that we have now complete, and the animal shelter. And it included improvements along Highway 78 and Main Street. $1 million of the overall $16 million was set aside for the purpose of improving Highway 78 and Main Street. In early 2011, a year after receipt of the TB&G plan, the city entered into another contract, yet with another urban planning group called Gateway Planning, Inc. The evaluation of the emerging growth area in North Schertz, to quote them, requires improvement in these areas. Now, subsequent to the initial engagement of this activity, this planning group, the city requested that the group undertake an evaluation of downtown Schertz again. The group was given the goal by the city with a business plan for future infrastructure and regulatory reforms and positioning Schertz for a next generation growth. The consultants produced, amongst other proposals, a gateway, quote, section plan for downtown that outlined proposals for creation of civic space, streetscape elements, gateway markers and screens, and additional suggested amenities for revitalizing Main Street from Schertz Parkway through Lindenberg Street. Meanwhile, between 2010 and 2016, the city moved forward with implementing the projects supported by the 2010 bond proposals for numbers 1 through 3. However, no known actions were taken to implement proposals associated with either bond proposal 4 or the Gateway Downtown Sector Plan. The Schertz Historical Preservation Committee commends the city and the council for its devoted efforts in assuring completion of the projects announced by the 2010 bond proposals 1 through 3. The committee believes it's long overdue to direct attention to implementation of projects associated with bond number 4 in the Gateway Downtown Sector Plan. This should be the year that actions are taken to fulfill the citizens' expressed desires for revitalizing Main Street and FM 78 district. The committee proposes to make this endeavor a collaborative outreach effort between all the stakeholders involved. We offer our support to whatever capacity the city finds appropriate for the purpose of forwarding the movement of projects associated with this bond proposal number 4 and the Gateway Plan. So that is an explanation of our objective number 4 in our 2017 objective plan. I think all of you have received an electronic copy of our annual report in which each of the other areas of 2017 objectives are so stated. So I won't go over those with you unless there's questions afterwards. The only other thing I'd mention is that as the councilmen who have been on the council for a while know, our society, our committee, has a sister society in Riedesheim, France. That's the birthplace of the Schertz family who first came in and settled our community here. And I would just announce that we've kept contact with the Riedesheim group throughout the year. I made a trip there in May and coordinated with their society. So we still have that relationship going, and we're enjoying that. In conclusion, the committee has completed, I think, a busy and productive year. We have developed a challenging but achievable goals for 2017, and we look forward with City Council support to achieving meaningful preservation results in the coming year. For several reasons, preservation does matter. Thank you for your support in this previous year and for your attention to this report. Would there be any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Wirtz. Anyone questions? Mr. Edwards?
You know, Mr. Wirtz, I agree with you. That area has been long overdue. We did pass those bonds quite some time ago, and I am in concurrence with you. I think that we should be doing something on Main Street. It's long overdue. It's been talked about, obviously, for many, many moons and many different councils as well. We need to tackle that issue while we can.
And Mr. James will address this further in his comments on item 6 or whatever that item is.
Indeed. Anyone else? Mr. Thompson?
Just want to thank you and your society for the work that you do, and we appreciate it very much. Look forward to working with you on some projects in particular as well.
Anyone else? Great work as always, and I really do appreciate the work that you and the team do, particularly with the work that you've done now with the school and the involvement of the kids and some of the things that they come up with is just it's fantastic, and it's a great event not only for them as they go through thinking about what they'll do and then producing something that they bring forward and sharing, and then it's a great learning experience. And again, before your group started doing this, we weren't doing anything around collecting or building archives of what's going on in the city. And I'll just share one other thing with you. I can't share it yet, but the son of Mayor Bucher found in his house, and Mayor Bucher's allowed him to share it with us, a big, almost 2-foot by 1-foot scrapbook of his years, not only from wartime, but lots of newspaper clippings and political advertisements and things from his time as mayor from 1973 to 1980. And they've shared that with us, and we're allowed to make copies of everything, and I'll get it to you as soon as I can.
Thank you. Yeah.
Lots more for the archives. Very good. Thank you all once again. It's great work. All All right, next item that we have on the agenda this evening, we have city events and announcements. And first announcement was upcoming city events. Who has the duty this evening? Mr. Waite.
Good evening. This Thursday, March 2nd, from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. at Retama Park is the 8th annual Race to the Taste event. Tickets are $20, over 40-plus food and beverage vendors, and for paying your entry, you get unlimited sampling opportunities. Saturday, March 4th, this coming Saturday, is the 9th annual Willincheck Walk for Life. Registration begins at 8 a.m. in the back parking lot of Clemens High School. The 5K kicks off at 9 a.m. And that'll be up and down Schertz Park, where there'll be a temporary road closure there for that 5K. Tuesday, March 7th is our next City Council meeting at 6 p.m. And then next Thursday, March 9th at 11:30 a.m. is the Northeast Partnership meeting. And then the week after that, March 13th through 17th, is our local school district spring break. Couple of save the dates. Monday, March 20th, right at the beginning of the lunch hour, is our annual Employee Remembrance Day. It's the first day of spring, and it's a time we get together to recognize those employees that we've lost in the past and we may have lost in this last year. And then Friday, March 24th, is the City Council pre-budget retreat, scheduled at the Fairfield Inn and Suites here in Schertz. And then lastly, our two TML events, sharing information from the legislative session. The first one is legislative updates from TML. Those are webinars, and we've RSVP'd for those. And if you can attend, we're working on a correct room size for everybody that will be there. So if you want to attend those on those dates, you can RSVP to Brenda or Donna. It's Friday, March 10th, Friday, April 7th, and Friday, May 12th. And then after the legislative session is over, in Austin at the Doubletree by the Hilton Austin, from 7:45 a.m. that morning till 2:30 p.m. On Friday, June 12th, will be the TML legislative wrap-up describing the good, the bad, and the ugly of the legislative session as it applies to cities. And if you'd like to attend that, City Secretary's office can also get you registered for that.
Depend entirely on how the legislature votes on several items, whether or not I want to be there. Very good. Thank you, sir. Next, we have announcements and recognitions by the city manager, Mr. Kessel. Mr. Kessel?
Mayor, Council, just briefly, from time to time, we get some nice letters. Normally, they're from a citizen or a business. In this case, within a couple of weeks of each other, we received some letters from other governmental agencies, one signed by the mayor of Cibolo, the other signed by the county judge of Kinney County, along with all the commissioners, the sheriff, and others. And they're basically praising our EMS and the regional efforts that they have. So I'm going to walk down to Mr. Crawford and let each of you look at these. They'll pass down all the way down to Mr. Davis.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Next, I'm going to skip down to the hearing of residents. Sorry, Mr. James. Mr. Sales is here, and he's the only one who signed up. And in case he wants to head out, I want to give him an opportunity to speak before we get into some lengthy potential workshops. So, Mr. Sales.
Thank you. Danny
Sir.
Sale, 3812 Hunters Glen. I appreciate that. I've got a comment about the downtown revitalization. Apparently, I am in the minority opinion from hearing the gentleman speak before. I realize that we cannot let any section of the city lapse into disrepair and all those things. But throwing money at a problem, I realize that 2010 there was a $1 million bond proposal passed, but throwing money at a situation will not make people come. And no matter what kind of infrastructure improvements you make, unless you get people to come, there will be no revitalization. So please keep that in mind. Like I had said before, lighting systems, sidewalks, things like that, making it people-friendly, possibly additional parking, that might encourage people to come. But just other things, it's just not going to happen. And that's about all I had to say.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're going to move back up to the workshops. The first workshop that we have listed this evening is a discussion summary and recommendations regarding the Schertz incentive policy. And Mr. Kyle, how are you this evening?
Very good.
Very good. It's all yours.
So good evening, Mayor and council members. It's a pleasure to be here and to report. Over the last couple of months, we've met with the Economic Development Corporation, who has gone through this policy and reviewed it and added in some of those items that they believe will help us to be more aggressive in our approach towards economic development. Please note that this policy that we're putting together, many of the components are voluntary. We're not required to have this formalized policy in the way that we've chosen to do it, nor are we required to have a policy that connects tools that are available at the city and also tools that are available through the EDC. And a reason that we've done that is so that we have a unified approach towards economic development by utilizing resources from the EDC board and then also from the city council. And so with that as a background, I want to go into the policy and at the heart of, and also I wanted to mention, Mr. Wirtz and his program that he brought. This is another tool that the city's used for economic development for a very specific area. And so the policy that I bring today will deal specifically with two tools primarily that we've used in the past and kind of, changing them and making sure that they're prepared for the environment that we're in right now in business attraction and retention. So with that, the Schertz incentive policy has at it really this foundation of primary jobs. Now, the primary jobs, this is a requirement that comes out of something that we deal with all the time at the EDC, and what it has to do with this idea that jobs are created that bring new money into our community, so that then we have additional money that can then be spent and circulated and help to grow our economy. And so the way that the state defines that for EDCs is that, it's where, jobs that have a majority of their product are ultimately exported from our region, and that they then bring new money into our region for our local economy. And they specifically go through and they also define specific industry types that are identified in the proposed incentive policy that you have. Generally, they relate to manufacturing, warehouse and distribution, professional services, and then also call centers. And there's some other categories that we don't have a lot of here in Schertz, but there are some other options. For this policy, we've included all of them that the state will allow us to have. So what does that mean? I've got here a graph over the last 15 years of our primary jobs that are on the books in the city of Schertz, and this is using the census data. And so you can see, since 2000 to 2016, we went from, roughly, we increased a couple of thousand jobs. Not a ton of growth in that time, but definitely, we have seen steady, stable, consistent growth. Now, again, go back to what we defined as those primary jobs, and you're thinking of manufacturers, warehouse and distribution, people who are sending product outside of our region, professional services, specifically think of architecture and engineering, people who are producing a product that goes outside of our region. With that, I also want to overlay our population. So the population is that dotted line, and it corresponds with the numbers that we see at the right. The job count corresponds with those numbers that we see on the left. And so you can see it follows that same growth pattern. Now, one of the things that, one of the concepts of bringing in primary jobs is that it helps with economic growth, and we see that with, population growth to the area. But it also helps to create, demand for other jobs or the secondary jobs that are created. And you can think of medical, you can think of retail, you can think of other, insurance and other type of jobs. And so I'll lay that on top here, the third one. And it's interesting as we go through the data that you can see as we've had spikes in primary jobs, what that's done for us. And so to me, this really shows that, this track that we've been on with our incentive policies in the past, that it's been working, and that it's helping to grow and helping to establish a market that we have to grow our city and to help, ultimately bring in those quality of life things that we want as a community. So with that, I want to go into the incentive policy itself, and I'm going to break it up into different funding and different programs that are within the policy. And so with this, the first one, the city of Schertz, so you as the council control the general fund of the city, and there's two programs that we have utilized under the general fund, and that's been a Chapter 312 tax abatement, and then also a Chapter 380 agreement that we may have a reimbursement, or we could dedicate funds or staff time. And so these are programs that have been utilized for a series of different programs in the past. Amazon falls under this type of a deal, where each year we, if they perform at a certain level, they qualify for a reimbursement. That fell under the Chapter 380, which is related to the city's general fund. So the second one is the Schertz Economic Development Corporation. So here we collect a half a cent of sales tax, that can be used specifically for economic development. And right now we have, over the last few years, we've really been able to put ourselves, thanks to Angelina and the other board members that have been there, in a position where we're starting to build up reserves. Right now it's about a little over $12.5 million that allow us to be in a position to really compete for a larger style of project. For instance, about 5 years ago, we were not in that position. We had very small reserves, and so when a project came about, I'll use the example of Cisco. When Cisco came and we needed to do infrastructure, we were not in the financial situation that we are now, and so we had to go out and issue debt, and it cost us more, and also took a little bit more time. Ultimately, we were able to do it. However, now we're in a position of strength much more because we have those reserves build up. One of the other things that I would say on the reserves is that by building up those reserves and having that that reserve balance, it allows us to plan for the future and to be more strategic in the way that we use those funds. And so one of the things that you'll see as we roll forward is planning for not only our annual budget, but also how it relates into those reserves that we have. So with that, we now dive, so understanding kind of the premise that the policy is based off of, and then really those two sources of where the funds come from, I'll dive into the specifics of this policy. So under the policy, one of the things that is highlighted is that the purpose of that policy is to create and retain primary jobs. Now, however, with that, one of the things that we wanted to do is make sure that we have the resources through an assistance center. So this is a setup system that we will have primarily on the website, which is information for businesses that they can come and get information without even talking to us. And they have it there, and they're able to find out information specifically on our market. They'll be able to learn more about our development process. They'll also have a good understanding of existing tax exemptions that are in place, like a triple Freeport as an example, that they look for, and then also a place that we can connect them with other partners that provide a resource to them that doesn't cost us anything. And so think of trade organizations in the areas, or chambers, or other federal and state programs that are there to help people. And so that first section really is to capture a real broad group of people and to build upon the customer service that we've built into place through that assistance center. As we go down, the next section deals specifically with the EDC and the EDC reserves. So under the EDC, one of the things that we wanted to do is we wanted to be more specific in the type of incentives that we would do and to go after specific groups. One, this helps me as I go out and I market and we try to attract, a certain type of business or retain a certain type of business to our community. So we've broken it up into 4 different categories: an existing business, a small business, large impact business, and extra large impact businesses. So with each of these categories, the EDC board went through and they voluntarily kind of set thresholds and defined what each of these are and set up specific incentives that they would use. So for an existing business, the EDC board elected to have that defined to mean a Schertz business that has been here for 5 years. Remember, they still have to be a primary job creator, but if they're here and they want to expand, one of the things that we'll be able to do is offer a performance grant, which is similar to what we have been doing, but then the boards suggest that we participate and are a little bit more aggressive by providing also assistance with the development fee grant. So think of the permit fees that a company is required to pay, or new impact fees if there's water and wastewater that's involved. And those numbers can really stack up. And one of the things that we've seen is that with existing businesses over the last couple of years, we have gone to them kind of under our old structure, and we weren't able to provide incentives that meant a difference. And so we have had a business leave, and we've also had others that have stayed and have declined to have an incentive, basically saying, we really wish that there was something that would help us for what all we're trying to do here, but it's not worth the risk that would be there if we took the money and be required to perform in accordance with the agreement, which we would require. The other group is a small business, and small businesses was defined as very, a very broad category by 50 full-time employees or having annual sales less than 10 million. This is a pretty big group. And one of the things that's unique about the small business incentive is that this allows us to utilize our incentives and to be proportionally a little bit more aggressive, but that the board would cap a fund each year at what they recommend $500,000 each year. So with the idea for a smaller business, we may be a little bit more aggressive and extend that payback period a little bit more than we normally would. But the idea is that it's at a smaller amount. And so, as a city and those businesses grow and we want them to stay here and, continue to expand, we're able to provide an incentive that's more attractive to them and that ultimately helps us to attract or retain them within our community. A large impact business. So this is something that is unique in that this sets a threshold where the EDC would be looked at solely for the responsibility of an incentive. What they propose is $100 million as that taxable. If a company comes and brings up to $100,000 of new taxable investment, that the EDC board will utilize their funds before looking to you and the city council to participate with one of the other incentives that we'll talk about. So when you look at this, this is something that allows us to utilize the reserves that we've been able to build up, but also frees up those additional benefits that will be coming to the community and that will be flowing into the general fund. So I'll use as an example, if Amazon were to come, currently right now, the city is paying for that incentive that they're receiving. And so under this new proposal, the EDC board would step in and that they would handle the responsibility of those future incentives so that it would then free up additional money for you on the city council and for the general fund. The extra large businesses, so anything that was over and above those large impact businesses, this would be a level that we would say, okay, this is a extra large impact business. This is a big deal to our community, something that we have not seen before. We want to leave in there and have the ability that the city would still be willing to participate if we exceeded that $100 million threshold. Now, each of these you would have the ability to choose on a case-by-case basis, and you'd be able to go through and see what that deal was and how it ultimately benefited the city and what you as the council were trying to do. In addition, under the SCDC reserves, one of the other tools that we have the ability to do is to pay for infrastructure for new and expanding businesses. And so the idea here is that this is one of the provisions that does not require the creation of primary jobs. It's tied specifically that we can pay for infrastructure, and so it wouldn't be a company direct incentive. But let's just say, if we had a large retail development that came in, and we were working with the developer and to help attract them and to ensure that they came and invested in our community, the EDC board would be able to utilize their reserves for the infrastructure. That's the idea behind that point. The last one, there are other tools and other kind of specific sections that EDC boards are allowed to do. We wanted to just kind of capture them all in one go-to group and have the ability to utilize those tools if we needed. They include things like workforce, some additional infrastructure. There are some things with the military. And so there are some other tools that we don't foresee using. However, in the event that it came up, we don't want to limit ourselves. So now to the next piece. We're going to shift from the EDC funds over to the general fund and to the city of Schertz. So the first one we talked about, that's the real property investment. So if there was a project that came in and they had over $100 million in real and personal property, that would be a scenario where we could come to city council and see if the council was interested in participating under a Chapter 380 agreement. So that would set that threshold. Now, that threshold of $100 million was a recommendation by the EDC board, not the city council, by the EDC board. The other one is a gross sales tax use. So one of the pieces that you are able to do is by establishing a policy, you are able to utilize city resources for economic development to promote economic development. And so one of the things that we have proposed and recommended is that for a venture that wanted to come in and a specific business that wanted to come into the area, as long as they created over what we proposed $35 million in gross retail sales, the city would be able to enter into an agreement with them through a Chapter 380 agreement. So this is very similar to the way Amazon had with their sales tax agreement. One thing to note, that $35 million, again, the board who recommended this is your decision what that number is. They wanted to make that low enough so it still gives you the opportunity to go out and to decide whether or not you're going to enter into an agreement like this. But it allows for a floor, basically, that we are able to promote as a city to say, hey, if we wanted a large retailer, and you could name any retailer, if we wanted them to come to our community, this is a way that we could participate with them. So, so ultimately, in summary, our as we put this incentive policy together, we wanted to put together tools that we would be able to use and that we could be aggressive with. This would be something that would make sure that the EDC was in a position to step up for property owners that also were willing to be aggressive and or developers, so that we can continue to see those larger projects that come to our community. I'm going to go back to the graph that we showed at the beginning. By focusing on those primary jobs, we see what impact that has to our region in helping us to grow on a much larger scale. This is very much a long-term plan. It's not a solve all problems overnight, but you can see that by committing to a program like this, the impacts that it's able to have. So with that, we've provided the proposed policy to you. Any questions that you may have?
Great, and thank you, Kyle. And before I open it up to the council, I just want to welcome and recognize Guadalupe County Precinct 3 Commissioner Jim Wolverton, citizen of Schertz and a longtime friend. Thank you for being with us this evening, Commissioner. Glad to have you. Council, questions for Kyle? Mr. Thompson.
Kyle, I want to let you know our appreciation for what you've done. Several things struck me as very positive. You've often used the phrase that retention is easier than recruitment, and you seem to be addressing both recruitment and retention in this policy. For recruitment, I particularly commend the creation of the Assistance Center. At the Chamber, we, more than people realize, we get phone calls where people walking in, they're asking for resources like that, to be able to point them to something that is existing where they can go themselves would be a great benefit to the city. Under retention, I appreciate the fact that you're willing to do some incentives, as I need to get here, that you're willing to do the incentives for the existing and small businesses. Working with many of those existing and small businesses, one thought that I would urge you to consider would be to make this grant or a performance grant or development fee grant or small business grant a one-time grant.
Okay.
But rather than having it only at the 5-year level, let's say a company at the 3-year level, they could apply for it knowing they would get 60% of that grant, but it's still their one-time grant. Or if they're at the 4-year level, they could apply and get 80%, but it's still the one-time grant. That type of flexibility might allow a smaller business who needs to expand that mid-level expansion without waiting the full 5 years. So we kind of achieve both purposes. We help that 5-year business, but we also show our 3- and 4-year business we're willing to give you a hand as well. Might not be as large, but that's your choice.
Very good. Anyone else? No? Kyle, thank you very much. Good stuff.
So, one, just to be clear, in what we wanted to bring this before the council for workshop purposes. One, those levels that we've set, and I'll use the example of an existing business being defined as here for 5 years. Those were all recommendations by the board. That we can go back and we can address those. So if there's any others, if not, it would be, we'll go back on that one issue. If there's any other issues, if not, then the next you will see this is for a regular item to approve our policy and then also the City 380 policy.
Very good. Look forward to it. Thank you, Kyle. All right, next item on the agenda this evening, we have a discussion and update regarding quiet zones. Mr. Ledbetter, good evening.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, Mr. Kessel. A few months back, y'all asked us to come get some more information on the quiet zones that run from Lee Street down to FM 3009. Since then, I've met with Union Pacific, and we rode out and visited each site, and he gave me his information that what he suggested would go there. So start from there. What is a quiet zone? It's a rail segment where train horns are not routinely sounded at crossings. Can only be established by a public entity. Railroad must comply if the federal requirements are met, safety requirements. Exception, only in an emergency will they sound the horn if there is somebody stuck on the tracks, just any type of emergency they see fit. Federal regulations, you need at least a half a mile minimum track length. We have a little over a mile. All street crossings must have gates with flashing lights. Constant warning time systems. Basically what that is that monitors the train speed, the distance they are from the crossing, and when they will be at that crossing. The quiet zone crossings must be safer than the national average. FRA, they set those standards. If it's not safe, if it's a high-risk area, they will not allow you to have a quiet zone in that area. But we're good in all that area. Supplemental safety measures. Engineering improvements would reduce the risk of a collision at the crossing. SSMs are installed and reduce the risk level below the nationwide significant risk threshold. Okay, 4 quadrant gates. I'll get into those a little bit later. Mediums or channelization devices, and one-way streets equipped with gates. Steps for implementation. City and FRA conduct a feasibility site visit. City conducts traffic study. Public meetings conducted seeking resident input. Task force, that would be the city, TxDOT, and the FRA involved, because TxDOT butts up to every one of those streets. Here's the 4 locations we're looking at: First Street, Randolph, Schertz Parkway, and FM 3009. Okay, here's a look at First Street. After meeting with Union Pacific, he suggested that this be a southbound exit only, no northbound traffic. That would be going out to FM 78. We would need new arms and the installation of all that and the wiring. That's approximately $75,000, and all these costs are approximate, depending on hiring an engineer to do all this for us. $50,000 for striping, concrete, asphalt, whatever needs to be done at the location. Okay, this is a kind of a dark picture. This is a quiet zone in New Brownsville. It's kind of something we would probably be using at Lee Street, First Street, and Randolph Boulevard. Okay, here's Randolph Boulevard. They're suggesting northbound traffic here, no southbound. Basically the same cost, basically same area, just okay. Schertz Parkway and FM 78 is where it comes kind of interesting. They are suggesting a quad gate at this location. A quad gate starts at $1 million. And again, $50,000 for the striping and anything that needs to be done at this location. This is a quad gate system I pulled off the internet. Kind of shows you the 4 different areas, 4 arms, flashing lights, signs everywhere. That goes into that $1 million that we would have to pay the railroad. This is FM 309 and FM 78. They're thinking we might be able to get away with some concrete work going north down FM 3009, but this could be another area where we might need quad gates. So you're looking at another maybe $1 million at that location. Okay, combined totals, all 4 locations, you're looking at almost 1.5, could be upwards to 3+ million. For these locations, not sure of the engineering cost. Of course, the prices are all approximate cost. And I've gotten some engineering firms that they recommend we use that do this all the time. If we council sees fit to move that way. Session.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Ledbetter on this side?
I have a question.
Mr. Gutierrez?
On the quad gates on Schertz Parkway,
Yes, sir.
is it really necessary? Do we have a high number of violators that go around those? Do we have a high number of violations that go around the crossings?
No, sir. This is just information that he shared with me that where I put this slideshow together. Without engineering, no, sir, I have not.
Is it based on traffic?
The quad gates is based on, well, on Schertz Parkway, you have Beck Street coming right there. But going with a regular gate, you would need a 100-foot median that would run north down Schertz Parkway. Well, if we did that, Beck Street, you could not make a left and head towards 78. So that's one of the reasoning beside for the quad gate at that location.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Thompson?
You mentioned a constant warning time system. Do we have these now, or that would be included in the cost?
Yes, sir. That we visited each site, and he looked at each box, and as far as all the safety aspects, we are clear to go.
We got anyone else? Mr. Larson?
And in terms of if the council went this way and this was all implemented, are there any ongoing costs associated with operating or managing the systems that are above and beyond what we currently pay?
No.
And then you mentioned the next step would be a feasibility study. Is that correct?
And hiring an engineer firm.
Okay. And do we have any idea of the time or cost for proceeding with the feasibility study by any chance?
No, sir.
Okay.
All right. Anyone else? It's quite a bit of money. My first inclination, although I don't live next to the railroad tracks, would be to continue to hear the whistles as they go past. $1.5 million is a lot of money. Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Ledbetter or Mr. Waite? Let the council think about that one for a while and see if that's something we want to pursue. Very good. Dudley, you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, just something we were, Brian and I were discussing over there. When we start looking at quiet zones, the city is the one accepting the liability for the crossing. And so part of this, when you talk quad gates and you talk about things like that, the reason that this would be an engineering study needs to be done is, one, because we're going to hold the liability, whereas today the railroad holds the liability for those crossings. That's why they're blowing their horn. The second one is that the quad gate and all that comes into play, not because of violations in crossing, but it's because it's to add extra security to prevent people from going around them. So folks not from the community, folks that don't live down by the railroad tracks, pull up and see the gate arms coming down, not hearing a train horn, would be tempted to go around the arms. And so some of those extra costs, some of those things we don't realize, we may end up putting quad gates at all 4 intersections based upon an engineering study. The railroad came out and said, based on our estimations, shrink these streets down in width. You need current new arms there, but the bigger roads, the 4-lane roads, Schertz Parkway, 3009, potentially are going to need quad gates just to make sure that the city's liability is protected as best as it can. That's the purpose. When on the New Braunfels picture, you saw the center median and all that. Our goal would be to prevent 100% people crossing over the railroad crossing while the gate arms were activated. So it's just a little different. From a city's perspective, it would be a little different perspective on those railroad crossings than what we traditionally have.
Very good. Mr. Larson?
And do we have any information, maybe objective data regarding the noise levels, how many homes are impacted by the noise levels, to what degree, any issues that it might be involving with development? Is there anything related to that, just that lets us know what, is this really an issue or not? Maybe citizen respondents, anything of that sort?
I'm not aware of anything right now.
Usually it comes up from citizens that live down in along the train tracks. We don't really get it on the north end of town where we have 2 train tracks, because it's mainly industrial up there. And so this is the second time in my 16-year tenure with the city that we've examined this and looked at the potential costs. And a lot of times it comes up And we'll go and look at what the options are and if there's any new technology, just because citizens bring it up from time to time. It's not something that people are calling us every week saying, hey, can we do something about the train crossings? There's a movie line I was talking to Mr. Kessel about. In college, I lived next to a major track like on FM 78, and the movie line is the trains go by so often you don't even notice. Is that a lot of times residents who live right there are not the ones, it's the ones who move in maybe a subdivision or two off of those train tracks that have never lived by train tracks that it seems to bother a little bit, and then we'll hear from them, and then we'll go and examine the costs and bring some stuff back to council to say, hey, it's still multi-million dollars, or there's been some technology changes, maybe we could do this a different route.
Very good. Anyone else? All right. We'll listen for any residents' feedback and feedback from the council. If not, we'll move on. All right. We've already had our hearing of residents, so we're going to move on to the consent agenda items. We have 2 items on consent this evening. The first one are minutes, and that is approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of February 14 and the minutes of the special meeting of February 21. And Ordinance 17M10, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, amending the City of Schertz Code of Ordinances, Chapter 34, Article 11, Food Establishments, Section 34-22, regarding the adoption of the Texas Food and Beverage Establishment Rules, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, and providing an effective date. Either one of these need to be considered individually. If not, is there a motion to approve the items on consent?
So move.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Thompson, a second from Mayor Pro Tem Edwards. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 I have 7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries. We have discussion and action items this evening, the first of which is Ordinance 17S01, which is an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, amending the official zoning map by rezoning approximately 375 acres of land from Planned Development District to Planned Development District. Ms. Gould, how are you? Good, good. Just remind the council, I believe we already had 1 reading on this one, and this is our second reading and 3rd public hearing.
While Ms. Gould is getting ready, Mayor, Council, Mr. Kessel, just like to say, after the first reading that was brought to council, we've had several internal meetings along with city management staff, as well as the developers and representatives from Crossvine. The current amendment that's being proposed tonight to y'all for the second reading, we support fully. We feel it's the safest, best option for the residents that are in that area for the product that's going to come forward. So I just wanted to take a brief second just to let you know that we do support it as it is written at the current time.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Chanry Gould with Planning and Community Development. Just to refresh everyone's memory, the applicant, Schertz 1518, is proposing a 3rd amendment to the Crossvine Plan Development District to allow for a new garden home configuration within the Crossvine PDD. And this exhibit here is outlining where the GH3 designation is proposed to be located. It is south of Lower Seguin Road, west of 1518, immediately north of Trellis Walk, which you can see has this roundabout here built into Trellis Walk, and east of Hollering Vine. Again, this was presented to your council early January. The GH3 designation being proposed incorporates green space in the form of buffers and common area green belts. And in order to build in more green space as part of their development, what the applicant has proposed is, in comparison to the GH1 and GH2 designations that have been adopted into the PDD, in comparison, the GH3 designation proposes lot sizes that are slightly smaller, and they're slightly smaller in order to build in more common area green space. And you could see that in this exhibit here. Between each of the rows of lots, there's more green space along with some alleyways that are also proposed, one-way alleys. At the upper left-hand side of this exhibit, you'll see one of the typical cross sections being proposed as part of this PDD what they've also introduced is a proposal for parallel parking for their local roads as part of the PDD. And now, during our first presentation, staff has gone through some of the technical components. And so for this presentation, I think we've adequately gone over all of the side yard setbacks and various technical features associated with this project. So what we wanted to do for this presentation was provide to you some examples, some images of that demonstrate what the applicant is proposing. And so staff had requested some sample images to present to your council that depict not necessarily the exact product type in terms of the way the actual buildings would look, but to depict the images, depict the green space areas that have been incorporated into this PDD. So I'm going to just go through some of these slides and point out some key features. With this image here, you can see common area, green space between the buildings. So similar to the GH3 designation that the applicant is proposing, this has some green space with homes that front the green space between each of those residences. And the applicant, as part of the green space area, what they've required as part of the PDD being proposed is sidewalks that traverse through the green space. Here's another angle for the same development. Again, some sidewalks that span across the green space between each of the rows of lots. Again, I want to emphasize the actual product itself may not necessarily look like this because they'll have to comply with the architectural guidelines of the Crossvine PDD. But again, this is to depict some residences that abut some common green space areas with sidewalks that traverse down the green belt. It's another angle of the same development. And as part of the GH3 designation, what the applicant is also proposing is one-way alleyways throughout the development that have garages that would take access off. And the purpose of that is to ensure that the lots, the way they're fronting the green space areas, the parking would be loaded off the alleys to encourage more green space between the lots and more pedestrian use that is removed from the alleyways, which would then be used for vehicular access. Here's another example of common area green space incorporated into a residential development. And this is an example from a different state. However, again, it shows some common area green space with a sidewalk that runs down the green belt. And I think the purpose of showing some of these illustrations to your council is to demonstrate that this design concept is nothing new. It's a concept that incorporates more communal areas, smaller lots that would then minimize maintenance requirements for each homeowner, and then in exchange, there's more community or HOA maintained grounds for the residents. And again, staff had presented this to your council January 10th, at which time your council had approved the first reading. And since then, staff has met, different staff members with different departments have met with the applicant in an effort to address some of the concerns that were raised the first time around, particularly concerns related to fire safety. And so the PDD document has now, since then, been revised to incorporate some changes to address those particular items. Those changes have been summarized in the staff report that was included in your packet. I wanted to point out one exhibit. This is a new exhibit that has been incorporated into the PDD. The only change that I made here for purposes of displaying it on the PowerPoint, it's not as visible without identifying the lines in red. The lines in red depict potential fencing that would be allowed within the GH3 designation. During the first reading, there was a concern raised particularly related to building separation and fencing between, within the separation area. And so since then, staff has met with the applicant, and one of the substantive changes that you will see that has been incorporated into the PDD is that regardless of the product being either center lots or zero lot lines being proposed, the building separation has to be a minimum of 10 feet between the two structures. And so whereas before what could have been allowed with the first reading was there was the potential for a fence to be put right on the property line in between the two buildings. That has since been changed, and so now where you'll see in red, that shows the conceptual, the potential fencing location that would be allowed, so that for center lots, fencing could be incorporated into the design for each residence, but it would be right along here where there would be no intrusion within the side setback area, and it would be on the portion of the lot that fronts the green belts. And then if it were a zero lot line development where the structures are actually within either right at the property line or within 5 feet, then the fencing could be allowed in between from corner to corner each of the homes. However, what would be required, and it's also been written into the code, is that the fencing would be allowed so long as there's a gate as well for access. This has been reviewed by staff from fire, engineering, public works, and planning, and staff has no objection to this. And I wanted to emphasize that, but if council has any questions about any of the other changes, I'd be more than happy to answer. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. We do have this item on this evening for a public hearing, so we can hear from the public on any comments they'd like to make on this particular item. I would ask if you'd like to address the council that you come forward during the public hearing, state your name and address for the record so the city secretary may capture that, and try to keep your comments to approximately 3 minutes. As the chair, I've got a little bit of leeway to extend beyond that 3 minutes if it's needed, but try to keep it to about 3 minutes. So at this time, with that given, I'd open the public hearing and invite anyone who'd like to address the council on this matter to come forward and do so at this time.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Glenn Outlaw, 3729 Forsyth Park. I would just like to express my appreciation to the planning staff as well as for the patience of the developer in correcting which was a situation that was caused by an oversight on another department. I would also like to thank council for taking an interest in this issue and seeing that hopefully this is a good lesson learned for some folks. But I just think it's good that the departments came together with the developer and worked through these issues to ensure the safety of the future residents out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. Anyone else that would like to address the council this evening? All right. It does not appear that I have any takers. So go ahead and close the public hearing and invite council to entertain any questions you may have for Ms. Gould. Mr. Davis?
Can you bring up the slide, the aerial view of the affected area?
It really was there earlier.
There it is.
Right there. Okay.
Now, you said this is the area that's would be designated for Garden Home 3.
Yes.
Would this area also be eligible for the Garden Home 1 or Garden Home 2 designation that was already approved previously?
Yes, it would be, sir.
So those previous designations are available for anywhere within this development where they want to put garden homes?
So the GH1 and GH2 designation could be developed in this area that's outlined in green. It could also be developed. It's essentially two designations that were approved previously to be allowed within the Module 2 areas of Crossvine.
And can you go to slide 4? Any idea where that is at?
I would have to ask the applicant because this was provided by
Or
the
slide
applicant.
5? The later slides had locations on them. I was just wondering where those locations are at. Anyway, my concern with this, I still have concerns with pushing the traffic out onto the lateral streets for parking. I see where that's probably going to. I'm just guessing, but I'm betting that that's probably going to come back, and we'll address that again in the future with all kinds of TSAC issues. But my biggest concern with this is the fact that in our UDC we have a standard of 5,000 square feet for a lot size for a garden home, and in the past the city has taken action to reduce the amount of R6 and R7, which were smaller lots. Now again, this is a 5,000 square foot lot in our UDC for a garden home, and we have a 2,500 lot standard for a townhome. And my concern with this is, in this particular development, we've already approved the GH1 at 3825, which is 76% of our UDC standard. And then we've approved GH2, which was 3,600 square feet, which is 72% of our UDC standard. And now we're back again for the third time looking for 3,300 square feet, which is 66% of our UDC standard. And it's getting to the point now where this garden home designation is now closer in size to our townhome designation versus a garden home location. I just have a problem with this increasingly shrinking lot. Again, if you're saying that we've already approved a reduced size lot twice, and it seems like we can't make, and again, this is not about garden homes. I think, as we talked in our previous meetings, I think townhomes and garden homes are something that the city desperately needs. My concern is we set a standard in the city, and it seems that all we're doing is cutting our own standard time after time again. And I don't know if that's the standard that I want to set going forward for the city, where every time somebody wants to do something, that we're just going to turn around and cut the standard. I mean, what's the point of having a UDC at that point? So, anyway, that's all I've got.
Anyone else? Mr. Thompson?
I commend the Crossvine staff and Planning Committee in addressing the concerns that the public and other departments have been involved with, particularly the fire safety, the parking. I take very heavily into consideration that the fire personnel have endorsed this, and I would move that we adopt ordinance number 17-S-01.
Second.
I have a motion for Mr. Thompson, a second for Mr. Larson. Other comments, questions from council?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Crawford.
Ms. Gould, we talked the last time about the 24 and a half foot road in the back of this for people to come out of,
Yes, sir.
being a little bit narrow.
Are you referring to the green belts?
Well, the road was on the back. Are these roads in here the ones that were 24 and a half feet wide?
So the green belts that are proposed have a requirement that the separation between the lots across from one another be a minimum of 24 feet.
Okay. And that didn't change?
No, that has not changed.
Councilman, was your question, though, and I apologize, I was hoping not to speak tonight and move us along more quickly. Was your question with regard to the alleys that access the lots between there? Yeah, those pavements are slightly narrower.
Yes, the alleys are proposed at 22 and a half feet. in width.
And no parking.
No parking parallel to the street. However, there are parking courts, so you could see
Yes.
them.
I've counted those.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Good. Anyone else? Not. I have a motion and a second, so I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
6 ayes. Sorry, got ahead of myself. 6 ayes and 1 nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much, Ms. Gould. Next item they have on the agenda this evening is item number 4, Resolution 17R11, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing the acceptance of the 2016 Racial Profiling Report and other matters in connection therewith. Chief, good evening.
Good evening, sir. Mayor and Council and Mr. Kessel, good evening. This morning at our briefing, I exaggerated, said I had 75 slides with small print that I was going to read, so they were very thrilled.
I hope that remains an exaggeration.
So this is the annual report for racial profiling. Buttons. So we'll discuss first the legal requirement for this report, quickly the report itself and any comparisons or trends from it. So in 2001, the 77th legislation enacted the Racial Profiling Act that prohibits the use of profiling based on race or ethnicity. In addition, it required some documentation from law enforcement, specifically the race and ethnicity of anyone detained and issued a citation or placed under arrest. We're to document if the race was known prior to the stop, if a search was conducted, and if so, if the occupants consented to that search, and if there were any complaints or allegations of actions that were in violation of the law. And finally, the purpose that we're here tonight is that this information is to be presented, in our case, to City Council, and it's also presented to the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement, which is our state regulatory agency. Now, this is the actual report that was in your packet, and from which I took the highlighted material. So in 2016, the total detained that were, again, issued a citation or arrested is 6,535. This is the breakdown of 98% of those, the racial or ethnicity breakdown of that. So looking at that, the question is, well, what does this mean? So the most often comparison made is with the demographics of the jurisdiction. So with that listed here, you can see using 91% of our population, the numbers appear to be proportionate. We can compare that for 4 years, and again, the numbers seem to be consistent. Oh. There it is. The numbers appear to be consistent across the board. The remainder of the report shows that the race was known in only 3% of the stops. There was a search conducted in only 5% of the stops. 8% of those were consented, and that there were 0 complaints filed in 2016 for allegations of actions that were in violation of the law. Using the data from this report, the fact that there were 0 allegations, and the data from recent citizen surveys, we feel that it does support the conclusion that the department is ethical and impartial in the enforcement of the laws and ordinances.
Very good. Thank you, sir. This is required reporting. This goes not only, does it go to the state and to the federal government?
Just to the state.
Just to the state?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Any questions for the chief? This side. Mr. Gutierrez?
Just kudos, sir. No complaints. Well, job well done.
Thank you, sir. Good. This side? Anybody? Mr. Thompson?
Move that we approve resolution number 17-R11.
Second?
A motion from Mr. Thompson, a second from Dr. Kaiser. Any other comments or questions from the council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes and no nays, the motion carries. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. Next item we have on the agenda this evening is item number 5, which is Resolution 17-R15, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing a First Amendment to the Mutual Regional Water Supply Contract between the Schertz-Seguin Local Government Corporation and San Antonio Water System, or SAWS, and other matters in connection therewith. Mr. Waite, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. In 2011, our local government corporation, Schertz-Seguin Local Government Corporation, entered into a contract with SAWS to transport 12,000 acre-feet of their water per year from their well field in Gonzales County to, it actually lands back here behind in the ground storage tank you see, and from there is pumped to their system off Nacogdoches Road. As a part of this at the time, because of the water that was available in our Gonzales well field, there was also a part of the contract that said if we could produce any excess water, we'd notify SAWS, and they would buy what they thought they would need. For many years, from 11 until 2015, they were buying 3,500 extra acre-feet a year, pretty much the excess that the corporation had to sell. They were buying every drop of water. In 2016, the unthinkable happened. 2015, the drought that we had been in ended. SAWS had some issues with the fact that they had made some decisions to move forward based upon the drought financial model and not the heavy rainfall financial model. And so they told us for the 2016 calendar year, they weren't going to buy a drop of excess water from Schertz-Seguin Local Government Corporation. Unfortunately, our rate models that we had been using from the corporation and Seguin and Schertz had come to rely upon that excess water being used. So we met, and it's a long story how the funding formula works and all the contractual pieces behind it, but the more excess water SAWS buys, it actually lowers the cost of their 12,000 acre-feet of water to transport it because of how all the debt model comes together. So it actually hurt SAWS as well financially when they said they weren't going to buy the excess water. So we were able, through reserves at SSLGC, to make up that 2016 lack of excess water sales, and sat down with SAWS during 2016 because their water operations folks were a little amazed that their financial guys said we don't want any more water because the water operations guys kind of felt like they needed excess water. So for 2017, they came back and said we're going to take 2,500 acre-feet of water. And then we sat down and had some discussions with them about entering into a take-or-pay so that us and Seguin and our corporation can better plan for the future. So what you have before you is an amendment to our 2011 contract with SAWS, adding 4 years of take-or-pay, make sure it is 4, 3 years of take-or-pay, 2018, 19, and 20. 2017 is already at 2,500 acre-feet. Take-or-pay means they're going to pay us for this much water even if they don't take it. So as a result, it looks a little low. It's 500 acre-feet. But what that allows us to do for our citizens and our corporation to do for charging us for the water they're producing for us is to plan on 500 acre-feet. If SAWS comes back and goes, you know what, in 2018 we're going to go ahead and take 2,500 acre-feet or 3,000 acre-feet or whatever we have, whatever the corporation has available to sell them, that only will add to the corporation's reserves, and that board is working on some mechanisms for some rate stabilization going forward as the new, as the secondary pipeline comes on board and the Guadalupe well field comes on board. So this is an amendment. It's doing a handful of things. The first is setting 3 years of 500 acre-feet take-or-pay that SAWS will do with the corporation. The other two are setting some dates, changing some dates about when SAWS when we will notify SAWS and they'll notify us of any other excess water that we can sell them and that they'll take. And then when we notify them of anticipated rate changes, and when we have to notify them of the official rate for the next calendar year. And so you'll notice that it only goes through 2020. That is because in 2021, SAWS expects that their Vista Ridge pipeline from up in central Texas will be online, and that they will not have a need for any excess water at that time for a few years after that. Anyway, the resolution, the SSLGC board has approved the contract amendments, but by the nature of how the corporation was set up, both cities also have to approve any contracts that the SSLGC enters into. And so we're here tonight via resolution asking you to approve these contract amendments with SAWS.
So I'll open up to council in just a second, but SAWS signed this.
Yes, sir.
They signed up for 500 acre feet per year. If they don't take it, they still write us a check.
Yes, sir. And it has to do with the operational cost of producing the water. It affects their rates long term. This is actually a better financial picture for them to guarantee they're going to take 500 than to say we're not going to guarantee, and then all of a sudden they say in 2018 we're not taking anything, and the effect of that on their rates would be worse than them taking the 500 acre feet or not taking it and still paying us for it.
No real downside for us. That's pretty remarkable. I don't know what y'all did to get them to sign that, other than maybe showing them those numbers and saying, do you really want to do this? That's it's pretty remarkable. Questions for Mr. Waite on this side? Mr. Edwards?
Mr. Waite, the cost of 500 acre feet that SAWS will have to pay us, do you have that number?
I do not have that off the top of my head. And that cost will change based upon the rate models for SSLGC. That's part of the stuff on the second page when we have to notify them of what those annual rates will be.
Okay, so in 2020, the Vista Ridge will be online, and so it seems like when they were doing this, they were doing an end around, and they stuck a straw in the bottom of a cup on us. At least that's what it feels like. No further questions. Thank you.
Dr. Kaiser?
I was just going to move to approve resolution number 17R15.
Second.
I have a motion from Dr. Kaiser, a second from Mr. Crawford. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 Have 7 ayes, no nays. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Waite. Next item that we have on the agenda this evening is item number 6, Resolution 17R16, a resolution by the City Council of City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing contracts with Pape Dawson Engineers Incorporated totaling no more than $195,000 for the design of the Main Street Improvement Project during the 2016-2017 fiscal year and other matters in connection therewith. Mr. James.
Thank you, Mayor. Dean Orts mentioned this a bit earlier with the Schertz Historical Preservation Committee. What we have is the last of the 2010 bond projects that the city is looking to move forward to completion. One of the things that we had hoped to do is stand up and add some additional funds to this project. But when we updated council, I believe in the summer, we talked about using the remaining street bond projects. We had a few small projects we had to do, some work on Wiederstein, a connection up around Mesa Oaks, in the Winter Hill subdivision. But then we also said we've got Schertz Parkway. And so we'll see how much the estimate for that comes in. Well, the estimate for that came in that it would eat up all of those remaining street bond project funds and more. So we move forward just with the 2010 bond funds allocated to Main Street. I will say this relative to the comments earlier from Mr. Sale. If you read the caption, it may imply it's infrastructure, water lines, sewer lines, roads, things like that. And certainly the language allows for it to be that. But if you take a closer look, really with regard to what it is, it's for renovating and equipping revitalization and beautification improvements to downtown city Schertz in the area of FM 78 and Main Street, with priority given to constructing features welcoming persons to the city, including but not limited to decorative pavings, crosswalks, curbing, decorative poles, utility relocation, lighting, bollards, bike racks, trash receptacles, benches, sidewalks, trail improvements. So the focus are more what I would call the visible, touchable sort of improvements, including the aesthetics. As Mr. Wirtz also mentioned, our guide for this project is really the Schertz Comprehensive Plan. We have a section on Main Street. As we talked about with the city's efforts on Main Streets, we are tackling that in a number of different ways. We've amended the UDC to provide for a Main Street mixed-use zoning district that allows flexibility of use. We've done the fee waivers. We have the Main Street Grant Program, the work of the Historic Preservation Committee in terms of the mural, the banners through the neighborhood. And this really comes in and touches a lot of it going forward. In some ways, this project is simpler than others. In some ways, it's much more complicated. Because it's those type of features, there can be at times a little bit less engineering design work that goes into it, as opposed to drainage and stabilization and things like that. But the challenges with this project are, and this is fairly common in these situations, it is an old area. It is historic. So you never know what's out there till you get out there and start digging. The other is that we have a lot of different stakeholders on this project. Now, we're helped by the fact that we've got the comprehensive plan that sets the vision for the area, and we're not planning to revisit that. Really what we're planning to do is get buy-in in terms of how we prioritize the funds and select some of the design elements. But we have a lot of different property owners, a lot of different residents, a lot of different business owners, and we expect they will all have an opinion on it, feel very strongly about what's happening out in front of their property and business. We also have to deal with Union Pacific and TxDOT, so that creates some challenges. But the real big one is the implementation effort. We want to make sure that we spend the time and effort in design to really plan this out. We've all seen the horror stories of cities that go forward with these sort of improvements. They hit something unexpected, they didn't do their due diligence, and you have business owners out there screaming that they're going to be put out of business because it's been torn up for however much longer than it was planned to be torn up, which is problematic. And so that's really where I think the bulk of the time and effort comes in with this exercise. Again, obviously with the maximum cost, if we're able to move forward more quickly, again, folks tend to latch onto a concept and we don't have to spend as much time with it. If the design firm is able to do their work more quickly, then we can reduce those hours put forward into the engineering cost estimate. But this is one that we plan to work very quickly with both the Historic Preservation Committee and then the property owners in the area. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Very good, thank you. Questions for Mr. James? Questions for Mr. James? There are no questions. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Edwards, a second from Mr. Thompson. Again, any other comments or questions from council?
I have a question.
Mr. Crawford.
Mr. James.
My apologies.
I didn't speak fast enough a while ago. The $195,000 is a max, not a guaranteed spent. Is that correct?
That's right. That's a maximum. And again, what you got with the contract in the back in very small font, which is why I had to go grab my glasses in case to ask, is you have the fee schedule. And again, this is one of our on-call firms. And so part of with that is their fee schedule. But really what it amounts to is the hours spent, the time spent. So if we can reduce the time spent, we reduce the amount of money spent. But this is the maximum. And we will design many of these processes to be as efficient as possible. We've already talked about as we get public input in terms of selecting those elements, it's a little bit like, for those of you who remember Luby's going through, it's a bit of a, you pick your own. So again, I've got this much money, here's how much these different things cost, which is the biggest priority for you, and then which design element that you like. And so again, we're not necessarily asking folks with a blank slate, we're getting them to go in and choose from a series of options that then tally up to the budget we have.
And this comes out of the $1 million bond.
Comes out of the $1 million bond, yes, sir.
And do we still have $1 million to start with?
We have slightly more than that. Again, one of the, it's not necessarily a benefit. One of the things that happens with your projects that you start later, those can accrue a bit of interest. So we have a nominal amount of interest, but it's less than $20,000 additional. So $1,019,000.
It's not as good as having extra money from bonds, though.
It's not. That's right. I mean, it's a balancing act. Yes, sir.
The other question, if it turns out we spend $195,000 on design work, that makes a 19% engineering design fee on $1 million project.
It does, yes.
Which is a little bit significant.
It is, and that's, again, as I said, the reason, again, if it were a newer area, we would likely be able to ratchet that down. The issue here is the unknown of what's out there, the staging of the project to leave it open. And so really what we wanted to do is make sure we didn't shortchange that and find ourselves standing up here answering to a bunch of angry property owners after we've been under construction twice as long as we have anticipated because we didn't do our due diligence. So we will try to reduce that as best we can. But to be clear, this is one we're really going to have to watch to avoid those problems. And again, you've seen examples in San Antonio, even where they don't tend to run long, depending on who you talk to, like Broadway, that was a mess for folks who dealt with that, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So we feel like it's worth it to put a bit more in.
The only comparison point I had was the remodel of the Guadalupe Old Courthouse. That was a $4.4 million project for a 7% engineering fee. And that had a lot of things that could go haywire also. Probably not as much as we could have here, but still, 19.5% could be a big number.
Yes, sir.
That was my concern.
No, understood.
You know, I want to see Main Street turn into Wimberley or whatever, but
Yes,
I don't know how to do that.
I've had the same reaction, and again, we look at our on-call firms to try to figure out which is the best fit for the project. Again, given some of the work that Pape Dawson has done, we felt like they were a good fit, despite those things.
Thank you.
Very good. Anyone else?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Mr.
Brian,
Davis.
this, even though earlier we were talking about the 78 corridor in Main Street, this is just limited to the design, is just limited to the Main Street Preservation Improvement Incentive Program area?
No, it's a slightly bigger area. It's again, the bond language references 78, and so again, one of the things that is referenced in the Gateway Plan that's a key issue, and again, it goes a bit to Doug Ledbetter's presentation, are those entryways. So again, we would anticipate doing something at Schertz Parkway and Main Street, which is maybe a bit tangential on the edge. Again, 78 as you come in on Randolph and Lee and things like that. So we may touch the periphery. So the boundary of the Main Street grant area is different than this. In this area, I think based on the language in the bond, has greater flexibility. Obviously, if there is a concern as we may stretch, we will certainly talk to bond counsel and make sure we don't run afoul of that, again, as cities have with various projects that can create a disruption midway through.
Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, I do have a motion and a second. I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes, no nays. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. James. Next item that we have on the agenda this evening, we have item number 7, which is Resolution 17R12, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing investment brokers and other matters in connection therewith. Mr. Walters, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. For the next 2 items, actually, that I have for you tonight is just general housekeeping items to make sure we stay in compliance with the government code, specifically the Public Funds Investment Act. When we were reviewing sort of our policies and practices after the last round of Public Funds Investment Act training that we went to in December, we were reviewing what had been in place prior and what our practices were, and we found that we needed to go back and kind of revisit a couple of areas we haven't been as strong in. One of those was authorizing an actual list of investment brokers. The list that you have is a list that the Capital One investments use whenever they go out and purchase an investment on our behalf. So we contract with Capital One to kind of handle sort of be our financial advisor, if you will. We give them sort of the general terms as the length of investments we want, the average portfolio, maturity, basically how long we're going to keep those investments. And they kind of handle the day-to-day, go out and purchasing items on our behalf. They have our investment policy and strategy, and they are required to follow that in terms of what they purchase for us. And then we monitor each of those transactions internally and review the reports monthly. So if there is an issue where they run afoul of our policy, we'll contact them and have them sell or correct any of the changes that they've had. They do have our policy, and they are required to follow it with terms of the investment brokers they use to go out and actually purchase the investments on our behalf. So the list that you have are the ones that Capital One currently uses for us. So we would be approving them since they are acting on behalf of the city. We believe this falls under the Public Funds Investment Act, which requires us to take a list of investment brokers to council for approval. So this is sort of current practice, but we're kind of closing the loop on the certain language in the Public Funds Investment Act. So if there's any questions from council, I'll be happy.
Very good. Any questions for Mr. Walters or Mr. Crawford?
Mr. Walkers, Capital One's the only company we use, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Now, we do have different investments, but Capital One specifically is the entity we use to go out and purchase different types of securities, like treasury agencies, other types like that.
We have another company that does the bonding stuff, separate issue.
That's a separate issue, yes, those aren't.
Good. The other question, so they do all the due diligence that's required in your strategy. It's a company's this document.
Yes.
Okay. We don't have to mess with all the making sure everybody's registered and licensed and all those kind of things.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Thompson?
Move that we adopt resolution number 17-R-12 and accommodation to the city financial staff for making sure we are in compliance.
Second.
A motion for Mr. Thompson, a second for Mr. Gutierrez. Any other comments, questions from council? Not, then I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. 7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries. Next item is item number 8. Resolution 17-R13, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, designating investment officers and other matters in connection therewith. Mr. Walters?
This second item falls on the same lines. This is another requirement of the Public Funds Investment Act for council to officially designate the investment officers of the city. This does not have to be done on an annual basis, but whenever there's a change in personnel and the designation has to change, we're required to bring those changes to council. So right now our policy states that the executive directors, the city manager, and the finance director are designated as the investment officers. The Public Funds Investment Act does require we have to actually name them instead of just the positions. So if any one of us were to change out, through turnover or other areas we want to designate someone new, we would have to bring that individual back as a separate item and have them approved at that time. These individuals are responsible for the day-to-day investment decisions within the city. They are restricted by the Public Funds Investment Act as well as our investment policy, and they are reviewed by the investment committee. So this is just sort of the day-to-day initiate transactions pieces that we do. If you have any questions over that, I'd be happy to answer as well.
Questions for Mr. Walters?
Just for the
Hold
sake
on,
of...
Mr. Crawford?
I'm sorry.
Walters, have a couple of questions again. In here it says that this team is supposed to submit recommendations occasionally on page 5 at the top. Presents recommendations for investment strategy based on the economic and market conditions to the city council.
On page 5 of the memorandum or
The strategy.
The strategy.
Page 5 of the strategy. The bottom 2 sentences basically of the first or the second paragraph. Above it where it says reconciling investment records.
General ledger, yeah. Yes, sir.
Is there a time when that's done, a specific time, or just whenever it's necessary, or what?
That is the another item we're correcting. We're bringing that one back starting next month in March. So you'll see that on the agenda as well.
Okay, I have another question. Go over to page 6, under number 4, Roman number 4, investment reporting, quarterly report.
The investment report that we'll submit for March timeframe will have all of this information.
For the quarter that ends in March.
Yes.
You will do probably in April, correct?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, we're coming back in March to start the first quarter, so we'll have all of those reports for October, November, and December, and then we'll start bringing those reports regularly back to council. So we're required to do a financial report per the charter, and we're required to bring an investment report, which is combined with that for this.
Thank you very
So
much.
those have not been coming to council, and we'll start as well.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Edwards? You're good? In that case, is there a motion to approve Resolution 17-R13?
So move.
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Thompson. I'm sorry, where was the second? Who made the second? Mr. Thompson and then Mr. Edwards? Okay, very good. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes and no nays. The motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Walters. Appreciate it. Next up is item number 9, Resolution 17-R14, A resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, accepting the semi-annual reports with respect to the progress of the capital improvements plan and other matters in connection therewith. Mr. Walters, once again.
Again. Okay, so this is another report that the city is required to submit to the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee, which is, once that approved by that group, is brought before council for ratification. This is a breakdown or a summary of the capital impact fees that we have spent in compliance with the capital impact fee report, the plan, capital impact plan. You have a copy of the capital improvements plan in your packet. The notable expenses for October 1st through March 31st of last year included the final amounts needed for the Live Oak pump upgrades for the water side. And then from April through September of last year, you have a transfer out. Those were for the setting funds aside for the Corbett elevated water tank, as well as the water line to the CCMA sewer treatment plant. So those both were projects identified in the capital improvements plan. There were no other directly related items for the sewer. The only one of note was that the sewer was paying for the second year of interest on the 2013 bond to help pay for the new sewer trunk lines, and the 2 years are up, and so you will not see that on the report again. This is required to come before the committee and council twice a year. Due to some personnel changes, we missed one of those sessions, so this time we're bringing both of those quarterly or semi-annual reports to you at the same time instead of twice. Going forward, again, it will get back on that schedule to where you'll see these every 6 months.
Very good.
If you have any questions over the report, I'll be happy to answer.
Will do. This is also listed for a public hearing. So staff's made their presentation, and I will open this up for comments from the public. Again, if you do come forward and want to make a statement with regard to this matter, state your name and your address for the record. And if you would, try to keep comments to approximately 3 minutes. Again, will be a little leeway there if we need it. So at this time, I'll open the public hearing. Anyone that would like to address the council on this matter may come forward and do so. Doesn't appear I'll have any takers. Long pause to be sure. All right. And at this time, we will close the public hearing and open it up for questions from the council. Gentlemen down here, anybody? No. Down this side? None. In that case, is there a motion to approve Resolution 17R14?
So move.
Second. Mr. Thompson with the motion and Mr. Edwards with the second. Any other comments or questions at this time? I hear none. We'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye. 7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Walters. Appreciate it. This time, it's time for a roll call vote confirmation. Mrs. Dennis?
Yes, consent agenda items 1 and 2. Motion was made by Councilmember Thompson, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Edwards. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, Council Members Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 2, ordinance number 17S01, final reading. Motion was made by Councilmember Thompson, seconded by Councilmember Larson. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards voted yes. Councilmember Davis voted no. Councilmembers Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. Motion passed. Item number 4, resolution number 17R11. Motion was made by Councilmember Thompson, seconded by Councilmember Kaiser. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, and Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 5, resolution number 17R15. Motion was made by Councilmember Kaiser, seconded by Councilmember Crawford. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 6, resolution number 17R16. Motion was made by Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, seconded by Councilmember Thompson. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, and Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 7, resolution number 17R12. Motion was made by Councilmember Thompson, seconded by Councilmember Gutierrez. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, and Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 8, resolution number 17R13. Motion was made by Councilmember Thompson, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Edwards. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, and Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 9, resolution number 17R14. Motion was made by Councilmember Thompson, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Edwards. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, and Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed.
Thank you, ma'am. Unless the council objects, we have a need this evening for an executive session, so if no one objects to me going to that, we're going to go to the executive session immediately and conduct that as quickly as we can and come back out. So we will adjourn our regular session and go into executive session at this time.
Wow. It's got the music. We know you're a music guy.
I didn't put the time on this yet. It is 10:05. 10:05, we're going to return now into open session. And the next item on the agenda that we have is item 13A, take any action based on discussions held in closed session under agenda item 13. I'm going to make a motion from the chair that we retain the services of the city manager and will reevaluate his performance at his regular annual review in the summer time frame. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Mr. Larson seconded. Motion's made from the chair. And I'm going to call for a vote.
Aye.
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 Vote is 7-0, aye, and we will move forward as such. The next item I have on the agenda, I will go to item number 10, announcements by the city manager. Do you have anything further this evening, Mr. Kessel? Item number 11, future agenda item requests for city council. Gentlemen, ladies, anything that we need on a future agenda that we don't currently have scheduled? Okay, very good. Item number 12, announcements by the mayor and council members. We'll start with Mayor Pro Tem Edwards.
I had an opportunity to go down to the rodeo with the rodeo committee and really enjoyed it. So I just thought I'd let you guys know you should really check it out. Rascal Flats was really good.
Very good. Mr. Davis?
Just had, with the other council members, had the opportunity to attend the Firefighters Awards Banquet. Great event, and you really learn to appreciate our emergency services personnel. That's quite a group that we've got there.
Very good. Mr. Gutierrez?
Just a special thanks to Lowe's for hosting the Home Improvement Expo this past weekend. It was nice to see the turnout.
Mr. Larson? Mr. Thompson?
I'd like to thank the public relations crew and whomever was responsible for producing the city video that was initially debuted at the chamber lunch. The state of the city. It was very well done, and to whomever the idea was to involve Randolph and SCUCI, SCSD in that, I think was very commendable and speaks well of the city and its staff.
Very good. Dr. Kaiser?
Just a couple of things. First of all, Mr. James and I had the opportunity Saturday to go out and help do the trail at Heritage Oaks Park. So we had a great time out there in the cold weather. And just secondly, I absolutely love the Schertz magazine this week. Happens to be my niece on the front cover. So.
Very cool. Mr. Crawford?
I'd like to echo Mr. Davis's comments about the fire department dinner. It's worth going to. I'd like to thank the city for allowing me to go to TML training.
Very good. I have nothing else to add. If there's nothing else then from council or from staff, then we stand adjourned. I got this from